Welcome, everyone, to the Book of Life. I'm Rabbi Sydney Mintz, joined by my wonderful colleagues, Rabbi Yoshi Zweiback and Matthew Gewirtz, for another incredible conversation today with Noa Tishby. And we're really looking forward to spending this hour with Noa, with all of you, to talk about the things that are so urgent. The Book of Life, again, each month we're going to be continuing. Next month, we want to remind you to join us on June 24th. We're going to re-welcome Dr. Larry Brilliant. Noah, hope you'll join us then to hear about what the post-pandemic world is going to be looking like for all of us. And now I'm really happy to have Rabbi Zweiback introduce our esteemed guest.
Thank you, everybody. We had a little bit of a scare right before we started. We realized we were in the wrong Zoom webinar room, which is a very good indication and an important lesson for me, which is I should leave the technical things to people who know what they're doing. So we're so glad that so many of you have joined us. And I just want to echo Rabbi Sydney's gratitude, words of gratitude that you're taking time to be with us this evening. Our guest this month is Noa Tishby. She is an extraordinarily talented actor, producer. She is responsible for bringing In Treatment to America. And that actually, I just was reading about how there's a new season that's going to be created in this HBO show. It was originally an Israeli show called Biti Pool, and Noa helped bring it to America. And in addition to all of the things that she's done in her career in entertainment and television and movies, she is also an author. And she shared with me recently the book that was about to be published. I was fortunate to be able to get an advance copy, which always makes me feel super, super like in the know that I got the copy before the rest of the world did. Israel, A Simple Guide to the Most Misunderstood Country on Earth. And I shared that with my friends, Sydney and Matthew, and said, wouldn't it be great if we could get Noa to join us? Little did we know how incredibly relevant this conversation would feel at the end of May when we first started planning this. We thought May would be great because, of course, that's the month where we celebrate Israel's birth, now 73 years, and we celebrate independence. So we thought May would be a perfect month for that. But obviously, given the events of the last few weeks, it's even more relevant. So, Noa, I just want to thank you for taking time for us and this really, really helpful resource, which if you haven't, those who are joining us, if you haven't had the chance to get it yet, you really should. And it's something that would be great to share with a child or a grandchild. If you have, kids in their 20s, 30s, we've been sharing it with our kids as well. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about, Noa, obviously these last few weeks have been incredibly challenging for Israel and for Jews throughout the diaspora. We're seeing an uptick in anti-Semitism that is truly horrifying. Online hatred against Jews has been widespread since the birth of the internet. But I was just reading how that the hashtag Hitler was right is now trending on Twitter during the conflict with Gaza, and leading up to today, there's been anti-Semitic violence in Los Angeles, in New York, in other parts of North America, and certainly in Europe. And I wanted to get your perspective on how you explain this. How are these things related? What we're seeing, the criticism of Israel, and now these anti-Semitic actions and anti-Semitic language, how do these things come together in your mind?
These things are obviously connected. First of all, I'm glad to be here with all of you. I feel very honored to be on stage with three rabbis and Tishby. So it's an honor. These things are obviously connected. I've been warning about this for a very long time. It's an unfortunate timing that we have right now, but we have scheduled this talk 3-4 months ago. And now we have to deal with what is happening. I have been warning for a very long time that the sentiment around Israel had shifted through grassroots operations and deep work that has been going on for over 20 years. And it shifted from is Israel modern? Who's right, who's wrong? Borders to like, yeah, but is Israel really a state or is it a colonialist endeavor? And that shift has been happening underneath most of the community's noses. A few of us that have been trying to warn about this. I call it, we've seen this online on a daily basis. I call it surfing the web while Jewish. We've all seen this. Eve Barlow, the activist, the fantastic activist, she actually calls it a social media pogrom. And as inflammatory as this language is, she's not mistaken. Did something happen to my screen? Do you guys see this?
Yeah, it looks like there's a filter on it or
There's
something.
a filter on it. I mean, I haven't moved and haven't done any. Excuse me for a second. Here's the it's Zoom Life. Hang on. I am very surprised by what had just occurred. I don't know what this is. Oh, I get it. I see.
I was going to say, it's your light. There's something to do with your light.
I was like,
I thought God was intervening here for a second.
Me too, literally. Much better. All right, it's like coming from the. Okay, good. So this rhetoric, this anti-Israel rhetoric, trying to brand Israel as a genocidal, ethnic cleansing, apartheid entity, a pariah state, is rooted in anti-Semitic Soviet Union propaganda language. It had originated in the Durban Conference in 2001. It became the foundation, the rhetorical foundation for the BDS movement, the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement, which infiltrated in the past, since 2005, infiltrated social justice causes, some sections of the Democratic Party, the media, academia. And this is a complete reframe of Israel as instead of the rightful home of the Jewish people and a national home for the Jewish people, the ancestral home of the Jewish people, as this pariah state. It's rooted in anti-Semitism. It's not that the conflict brought out anti-Semitism, is that anti-Semitic sentiments allowed for this conversation against Israel to take hold to begin with. And we've been warning about this for a very long time. It's literally the reason I wrote the book, because I've seen this shift in public opinion, especially with the young generation, that they think of Israel as a given. They take it for granted to some extent, or to a large extent. They don't think 2 seconds about it. And they just go on with their lives, uneducated, not knowing the history, not knowing what a miracle it is that Israel is around. And they would think that they'd be spared should, pardon my French, hit the fan. And what had happened in the recent conflict, and all that it brought out to the surface, it only brought out to the surface what had existed there for over a decade. What we all knew this was coming. And if there's any silver lining in this situation, is that the community woke up. A lot of people who are secular Jews, culturally Jews, never cared about it. People who are deep in like the BLM community, deep in like music community and various other communities have suddenly woke up and realized that they need to educate, first of all, themselves and then everybody else. This is going to take a long time. This is what I've been saying for a very long time. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, and to say otherwise, you're pretending. And you cannot not draw the correlation between Bella Hadid and the rest of that crew chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, to attacks on Jews around the world. You can't not draw that line. So they're absolutely connected. It's going to take a lot of work to undo the work that has been done, because it's been so thorough and has been going on for so long. But, we can do it.
Thank you for that, Noah. Now let's turn to the book. One of the reasons that you are, everybody hold up their book, Israel. One of the reasons that you have found yourself literally all over the country and internationally at this important time being interviewed and talking about Israel. And I have to say, it's a reflection of today's reality that writing about Israel and loving Israel and coming out supporting Israel is a moment of bravery. And so I want to thank you for, maybe you were prophetic about this moment, but we owe you a debt of gratitude to surface this writing and your experience in your life at this moment. And I also have that feeling when you get an advance copy that there's something very special. And there is something very special about this book, not only at this time, but there's plenty of books about Israel, as we know. This is one that I already have recommended to a lot of young people. a lot of young Jews, high school, college, millennials who are really struggling and literally are in anguish about their own experience, their history, their knowledge. And so I want to thank you for also using the language that young people can understand today. And by young, I mean people under 90, because that's, I fall into that category. So tell us, what was the impetus for you to come out and write this book? Who's it for? Who did you imagine the audience to be?
That's a great question. And I always give the same answer because I want everybody to be very clear about it. The answer to why I wrote this book is because I needed this book. I realized that there isn't a book about Israel that makes it easy to understand, that's written to a modern audience, that's written in a way that's down to earth, that's personal, that's irreverent, that's tongue in cheek, that's funny, that's like, but that gives all the details, historical details very accurately, but that's easy to understand. And after years of working in Israel advocacy and talking to people from like lectures and talks to like living room conversations with my super progressive friends, I found a way to explain Israel to people in a way that they get it. And after 15 minutes with me, they'd be like, okay, okay, I get it. Never thought of it like that. And I was asked many times, like, is there a book I can read? But something that's easy, like, because the majority of people are not going to read, unfortunately, Thomas Friedman and and Benny Maurice. I read this, you guys read this. I'm sure almost everybody on the call read this, but I'm sure you know that your children or your friends in college, they just won't. So I knew that a book like this did not exist. I knew that it doesn't, it's nowhere to be found. And I decided to write it. And it also happened when I was writing the proposal that I realized that this is the first book about Israel that's ever written by a woman. So not only has it not been written in a way that's for the modern audience, but it's only men that wrote books about Israel's history. So it just so happened that I knew that the need was there. I knew what was happening to young people, to liberal people, to celebrity culture, to cancel culture. I knew what was happening, and I'm like, oh, this is bad. So I wrote the book. The book came out, and 4 weeks later, the war started. It was kind of shocking.
What's the reaction been to the book, given that it's come out during this time?
Well, so the reaction to the book I started realizing that I think I have something special here when I started going out for people with requests for blurbs. So before the book came out, so I started collecting these recommendations and I started sending it to people like pipe dream people, right? And I started getting responses and people standing behind the book publicly. So I got blurbs and endorsements from Bill Maher to Aaron Sorkin to Richie Torres and Majid Nawaz and Eric Weinstein and I mean Ray Kurzweil and just a crazy list of and Rabbi Wolpe and just an extraordinary list of people who were willing to, and Yossi Klein Halevi and Mati Friedman and all these people that are leaders in our community and not in our community that read it and said, yeah, I'm going to put my name behind this publicly. And I was like, oh, I think I was able to do what I set out to do. So that started a great response to begin with. And then the book came out and it's received great reviews so far. It feels weird to say it, but the response since the war started was that the book has not been available to buy a hard copy anywhere for like 2 weeks. I think actually it just got back to Amazon now. But it wasn't available for 2 weeks. It wasn't available on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, on Porchlight, on anywhere. And I mean, so I was getting a lot of frantic calls from people who wanted to buy it and couldn't. So the response was good.
After reading it, it's not surprising to us, especially since we'll say for the third time that we've got advanced copies before any of it, but incredibly well done. You just said something important. I mean, I'm blown away by the people who were willing to blurb it, but everyone from Bill Maher to Mati Friedman I wouldn't necessarily expect them to blurb anyone, but I would expect them to be behind Zionism because I've heard them be outspoken, especially someone like Bill Maher, who is such a lefty and yet is so unabashedly Zionist. You said before, and I just want to clarify because I want to make sure I am having in my congregation, and I'm guessing that Sid and Yoshi are as well, a lot of pushback on BLM and other GLBT, but other movements we fought so hard for. And suddenly I'm getting every day 5, 10, 15 emails that say, you made us march, you encouraged us to march, you pushed us to march, where are they? So are you, when you say that people have woken up, are you saying in a positive way that people in these other circles who have suffered oppression are now stepping up and denouncing anti-Semitism? Or are we waking up to the fact that they're not?
No, we're waking up to the fact that this is going on.
No, I understand, but are they with us or not?
Well, it depends on who's they.
Right, I understand. Are you finding that some of those groups that I just mentioned are making sure to send positive and encouraging messages in this way towards us?
Let me be specific about BLM. BLM in and of itself is a fantastic organization for Black rights and equality in the United States. However, in the past few years, they have been infiltrated by the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, by BDS. This has been done very thoroughly for a very long time. I heard about this before it even became public through, again, the circles I travel in which I started hearing friends would call me up and be like, did you know BDS sat down with so-and-so from BLM? And I was like, what? Wait, why? No, what are they doing? What are they doing? They were able, BDS uses intersectionality to co-opt these social justice movements. I would venture to say that Black Lives Matter is not overtly interested in dismantling a democratic state. I would venture to say that if you ask them, do you want to dismantle Israel? Some of them will say yes. Okay, so let's not fool ourselves about that. But like the majority of people that support BDS would say no. And the majority of people who support BLM would say no. So it's been co-opted and manipulated. And like they use code words like justice and freedom, but they don't say it out loud. And a part of what I do in the chapter about BDS is I'm basically ripping them a new a-hole. I'm trying to show them for who they are. It's okay. We live in a free country. You're welcome to say that you don't want a country that exists to not exist. You're welcome to say that you want to dismantle the single consistent democracy in the Middle East, but say it out loud. Don't hide your agenda, which is what they've been doing. It caused real damage with the Black Lives Matter community, real damage that we have to undo. It's going to take a lot of work. So my sense in terms of my position about Black Lives Matter is that they're misguided. They have been fed lies, misinformation, disinformation, and very one-sided, just one-sided reality. I hope we can take that back because as you said, and as I say in the book, the Jews and the Blacks as minorities have always been aligned. But I don't need to repeat for you the freedom fighters and the freedom riders and Rabbi Herschel walking with Dr. King on the bridge in Selma. Like we all know this. These movements and these groups have always been aligned and continue to be aligned. And we need to just look at them as a misguided situation that needs to be corrected. Some of them are lost forever. Some people, individuals are like lost. But as a movement, I'm sure we can repair that.
Really appreciate that, Noah. One of the things that was painful for us to read about over the last couple of weeks is a group of rabbinical students at a variety of different seminaries, the Hebrew Union College, Jewish Theological Seminary, the Reconstructionist Rabbinic College, Hebrew College, largely within the liberal Jewish streams, authored a letter, an open letter in the middle of the conflict when thousands of missiles were raining down on Israel and terrible trauma that many Israelis were feeling, obviously, as a result of the fighting. There were innocents on both sides who were being injured and killed. I mean, really, really difficult time. Obviously, I don't need to go into all the details. We all remember it. But in the midst of that moment, this letter was published that used language that sounded to me, when I read it, much more like the kind of language you would read from a BDS proponent. talked about the violent suppression of human rights in Israel. It used the word apartheid. It conflated, you were just talking about intersectionality. The letter conflated racial justice issues in the United States with racial justice issues in Israel. And many of those comparisons, we know how insidious and dangerous those comparisons are. And I guess the question I'm personally struggling with is, on the one hand, I sort of understand how people spoon-fed some of these lies and misinformation and intentional distortions who aren't part of the Jewish community. I can understand how they might end up carrying those and believing those, and even sharing those out with others. But then to see it coming from folks that I thought knew better. These are products of Jewish summer camps, products of Jewish day schools. These are people who want to become rabbis. And I read it and I was actually taken aback. So I'm wondering, from your perspective, how do you explain that when you look at not just Jews, but deeply committed Jews who want to take on leadership roles in Jewish community, using that same kind of language, those same kinds of misinformation and even distortions and even lies at times? How do you make sense of that?
That's exactly what I was saying, and that's how good that rebrand is. So for Jews, we are about Tikkun Olam. We're always stand on the side of justice and tzedek tzedek tirdof, and we're always stand on the side of human rights, always. When there has been over 20 years of work to reframe the conversation around Israel, and to use the oppression, the genocide, the ethnic cleansing, all these things have permeated the conversation so much so that they appeared on like rabbinical studies, like rabbinical students. That's how good, that's how well, that's how effective that rhetoric and that agenda was. It's that concerning. The thing is this, right? I'm the last person to say that Israel's perfect, that the Israeli government is perfect. Like, the last person. There's no such thing as a perfect government. It's ridiculous. Once you look at how the sausage is made in every single country, you're gonna find things to point out to that don't stand up to values that we all aspire to. Okay, that's reality. That's life, right? But to keep pointing to nitpick and keep pointing that at Israel, and to have this particular obsession with Israel is, again, I wouldn't say that the rabbinical students are anti-Semitic, but they're being used by people who are, to kind of pinpoint. It's like, there's, I don't need to go through like the level of like actual countries that actually violate human rights and the atrocities that are going on in the world. And what about like fighting for Palestinian rights in Lebanon, where they're actually being oppressed and can't like get a job? What about the children of Syria? What about the Muslims in China? There's so many causes in the world that are worthy, yet the world is particularly obsessed with one country, and one country only, and that country happens to be Jewish. Maybe it's a coincidence. It probably isn't. And to have it be that insidious that it comes up there is very concerning. It's very concerning. I hope they retract this letter. What can I say? But the damage has probably been done, because what happens on the other side, by the way, what happens on these nefarious voices and these nefarious people that want Israel to be dismantled, right? I'm not going to put everybody who ever supported BDS or BLM in that group, but like the people that actually have that agenda, they tokenize these Jewish voices against us. So they will forever use this rabbinical letter to prove that their point is right. Like they use Netulei Karta. They use Netulei Karta. Bella Hadid actually reposts Netulei Karta. And she's like, those people, those are Jews. And they say that Zionism is an abomination. And I'm like, do you know who you are just promoting? And the answer is obviously no. So
hard, very, very hard. But you articulated it really well. I mean, from somebody who has the unique vantage point of having been born in Israel and lived here in the United States. It's a very unique perspective. And you just said to us that the reason you wrote this book, and I love that answer, was because you needed this book. It hadn't yet been written. And I have to say that what kept me in the book was that I needed the book. And I was reading it in the middle of this time of great trouble and turmoil. And what it did for me is in the trouble and in the turmoil, it helped to reignite my passion and my sense of Ahavat Zion because of the things that you described about hummus, about SodaStream. I was just thinking like, like I was like, hey, SodaStream. It's in the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the things culturally that we love and that we have pride about so many times aren't able to surface. We aren't even able to surface them. And my God, the kids in our midst, the high school kids, the millennials, college students who are being barraged by anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, and they don't even know. And many of them haven't had the Ahavat Zion rooted deeply in them yet. I want to know if right now I'd like,
even if they do, even if they do, completely, totally Jewish and love it and all that, and they have an intuitive knowledge that all this is not true. They don't know what to say. And I kept saying now in the past few weeks, I'm like, here's the thing. If we can't have our community, every single one of the people on this Zoom and every single one of our friends, family, whatever, if we don't know the answer to come, if we don't know to say, what happened in 1948? What happened in 67? What happened in 73? Why Israel is not an apartheid state? Why is it not a colonial state? Why is it not overwhelming use of force? If we can't answer these questions, what is Zionism? Why is it not racism? If we can't give these answers, why are we surprised that the entire internet is turning around against us?
So what are those things that, not to make this a shiny and light and joyful interview, but the thing, you obviously wrote it because you also, with a complicated relationship, you love Israel. So what are some of the things from the book, not just misunderstood, some of the things that are misunderstood that people don't know about Israel that you love about your Israel? What are the things to focus on?
What are some of the things that it's interesting to write in both hats as an Israeli and as an American, because there are a lot of things that I see from an American point of view, looking into Israel, that I can communicate back out that people in Israel don't even see. So for example, there's a story there of my grandmother in Degania in the kibbutz, right? And she's one of the founders of the first kibbutz in Israel. She's an amazing woman. Everybody reads the book, like loves my mom and loves my grandmother, and my family's amazing. They're a bunch of ninjas, as I call them. There's at the steps of the kibbutz, at the entrance of the kibbutz, there's a tank. That's a Syrian tank. So when you drive to Degania, if anybody's ever been there, you make a right and you walk into the gate, there's a tank that's there. And it's not a fake tank. It's not like a kid's tank. It's a French Renault Syrian tank that they kept there from the war in 1948 to show how close the Syrians got to the kibbutz, and they just kind of left it there. And they, it's black, it's menacing, it's like hanging out there. All the kids climb on it. It was my favorite thing growing up. And only when I grew up and became an adult that I look back at it and I'm like, oh, that's so weird. There's a tank. Like there's a tank. Like they just left the tank for the kids to play, like literally. And when I brought this up to my sister, I'm like, Han, did you ever stop to think how weird that is? That there's a tank at the entrance of the kibbutz? And she's like, huh, I never thought about that. So finding out all these little like, or for example, when I have this meeting with Yair Lapid and I go to meet him at this cafe in Tel Aviv, and I walk into it and I'm already writing the book, and I kind of in the corner of my eye, there's like an Arab family and a religious Orthodox family, and they're standing outside, they're sitting, they're having lunch and all that. And I kind of walk past it and I'm already kind of writing the books. I'm already in my like American kind of adapting, translating to Americans, Israeli culture. And I kind of look at it and I go, majority of Americans wouldn't actually think that this happens. They don't know that there's a coexistence on the ground that happens with Israelis and Jews and Arabs and this and that, and it's like nobody blinks an eye. So it was beautiful to kind of decipher through these little kind of stories and anecdotes to paint a picture for an American audience that they wouldn't have had access to otherwise. The little stories, the little kind of vignettes.
And it's interesting because any of us who spend any real time in Israel almost get so used to seeing it that we forget to report it ourselves.
Yeah.
Think about the United Hatzalah, who brings Muslims, Jews, and Christians together, serve on sometimes settlers with Muslims from East Jerusalem. And when I said, come on, guys, like this is not normal, and they're like, what do you mean it's not normal? And they said, we have the same color blood. And I said, guys, really, it's not normal. I mean, no one back at home would ever think that. So I get the stories, and we're getting flooded just because we have lots of people with us right now, and flooded with questions from college students, from people worried about social media, from the
Should be worried about social media.
Yeah, they should be, but they're all asking the same question in different ways. So how is it that we unfold the last 20 years? And we can't walk it back. We have to go forward. But what do we actually do? People are asking.
First of all, get yourself educated. It's our responsibility to answer all these questions that I just gave with like eyes closed and while you're sleeping. Don't be surprised if other people can actually write the narrative for us if we don't have the answers. So as a community, it's our responsibility to know all of this. And the other thing is, for me personally, and for a lot of activists and a lot of us that are working on it, it's to go on the offense. We can't be defensive anymore. We can't sit still. We can't sit back. It's my job, or the role I've taken, to expose these people and expose the language and expose the manipulation and expose what's been done to us. It's not a joke. Eve Barlow, she called it a social media pogrom. It's not a joke. This is actually happening. So that's what I intend to do. I think that if you arm yourself with the facts, you don't feel so uprooted when somebody comes at you with an issue. Because a part of what's been going on is people get so scared because they just didn't know what to say. And we didn't know what to say not because the answers are not there, because we didn't bother to learn them. So, that's what I would do.
But are you suggesting that we not just go on offense on social, like we call BLM friends, we call people in these other circles and say, we want to start conversations because we feel like are you suggesting that?
Absolutely. If you have, I'm now suggesting this to everybody. Once you have the answers, once you know what has been going on, if you have friends within BLM, if you call your Black friends, sit them down and be like, listen, here's what happens. Here's what's been going on. But you have to know, you know what I mean? Because you have to know the answer. If they go, Israel's suppressing Palestinians. Okay. And so like, no, they're not. To actually break it down and explain the situation. It's like, it's not easy, but it's doable.
Thank you. I wanted to just make an observation, and then I have another question. First of all, when you were talking about, what you love, one of the things that for me personally, I'm very fortunate to have lived in Israel for 5 years, and we're dual citizens, and we go back and forth a lot. But because of the pandemic, we haven't been since the summer of 2019. And we weren't actually going to go this summer because I haven't seen family in a while, and I wanted to, see family members that I've been missing in person. And we're still going to do that. But last week, in the middle of all the craziness, my wife and I booked tickets to go to Israel and see friends. And, I texted my Israeli friends and family and said, we're coming and we can't wait to see you guys. And so I think that's really important, that we remain engaged. Those of us who have those kinds of personal connections, reaching out to our friends and families and loved ones, and to the extent that we're able to, physically and otherwise, to just go and visit and to be there. I think it's important for us. It's important for our friends and family there. So I really appreciate that. And then the other thing you mentioned, Noah, that, reaching out to our non-Jewish friends and saying, I need your support. And one of the things that I did last week is I reached out to 2 pastors who I'm close to in Los Angeles, one in Inglewood and one in Compton. And I said, now's a time when our community could really use your voice. Could you send a video sharing a prayer for Israel? And they both did. And to see them share their words and share it with their community is really, really important. I wanted to ask an entertainment-based question. And actually, we got a couple in the chat. Someone said they wanted to know when you're going on Bill Maher's show to talk about the book. So hopefully someday soon.
If anybody on this group knows Bill Maher, anybody from their team, just throw an email and just be like, get her on the show. I'm so talking to them, but we'll see. Several
other people said, Noah should be the spokesperson for this kind of hasbara, and that's in many ways what this book is, not hasbara, but you are being a spokesperson. But the question I wanted to ask you is about actually what I referenced at the very beginning when I introduced you, that B'Tipul, in treatment, you were one of the producers that really helped bring that to the United States. And because I know you and we're friends, I'll say that it was all your idea. No one else had anything to do with it. It was Noa Tishby. And now there's another season. But in the wake of that, we've had Fauda and Stiesel and Finding Alice on Apple Plus. So I wanted to ask you, how do you think those shows change and expand the way, notwithstanding everything we're hearing about what's going on in social media and other things, on the other hand, you have this counter trend where you have a show like Fauda, you have a show like Stiesel, and all of a sudden, and I always think about a show like Stiesel, like how do people, right now I'm in the town where I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, I'm like, how do people on Netflix, when they open up Stiesel, like what do they even make of this? What do you think, this whole trend of bringing Israeli shows to America, good for the Jews, good for Israel? Maybe you could just share a little of your thinking about how that affects the way people see Israel and see Israelis.
So first of all, you will differentiate between the shows that are based on a format. So the majority of people who watch In Treatment or Homeland or Euphoria or Beauty and the Baker, that's a format readapted. So they wouldn't even know that it's an Israeli show, that what they're watching is an Israeli television show that was translated to English and reproduced in America. The ones that are streaming in the original language, like Fauda and Alice and Stiesel and all that, I do think they help. They really do help. They provide soft power for Israel, but they are not strong as the forces at B that are against us, as we see now. So we need to push in all fronts. We need to, it has to be from like the political side, from Israel to doing work in Congress and Senate, to doing grassroots operation, to approaching Black Lives Matter and having conversation with them, to conversations with them, to more of these shows that show, showcase life in Israel. That needs to be across the board, done across the board. Of course, it's helpful. I've seen from the first phone call I made about In Treatment that people didn't know what I wanted from them. I was like, I have a show from Israel, and they're like, good for you. Why are you calling me about this, right? To now, whereas that happened very quickly, right? The Hollywood entertainment community is like very well across how much of a flourishing creative community there is in Israel. So that we need more of that. And now it's the truth came out, that it's not that like the damage has been done in the last 20 years and the truth came out. And now we can, as a community, Jews, non-Jews, supporters of Israel, whatever, we can actually work around what's the problem. You know what I mean? And actually fight it and hopefully win it. But very helpful. It would be very helpful, all these shows.
You think there's a show that, is there a show you'd like to make that has not yet been made? You think about from the vantage point now of living in Los Angeles, what would you like people to know that's not people who aren't book readers, but they are on the screen? Is there a show you'd really like to make about Israel?
I wish I can say, okay, so there is, but it's not my show. It's my friend is writing it now, and it's so good, and I wish I can share it with you, but I can't.
Okay, we're on pins and needles. We'll wait for it to come out.
Showcases a particular reality in Israel between Jews and Arabs that not a lot of people know about, but is very well known within that community in Israel. And when that comes out, that would be amazing.
That's awesome. I do have to say, just when you said that, you have a friend's show that a lot of people today don't actually read, and they are very focused on their screens. And so I think that all of the shows, the ones that Yoshi mentioned, and maybe the ones about to come out, as you said, your friend is making, they have a tremendous impact on getting people to understand it's, whether or not you agree with the Israeli government, whether or not you're a supporter of Bibi Netanyahu or Likud or whatever you support, that there is a unique culture that we don't know about because Americans get educated on the screen most of the time. So I think it's it's important and fabulous that there have been so many shows, even though some of them I cringe at, that's what they think of us, but I'm still glad that we're out there.
Yeah.
Wanted to just, because I've now been living in Los Angeles for 9 years, Noah, just quick pitch, okay?
Yeah.
3 rabbinical students, okay? They meet each other in Jerusalem, 1992. Incredibly charismatic, handsome, brilliant, everything. They reunite. They start this thing called the Book of Life. You take it from there. I've got some casting ideas. The rabbinical student from Omaha is played by DiCaprio. Okay, I'm done. All right.
Rachel Maddow. Am I hearing a Rachel Maddow, Yoshi?
Yes. Yes.
Oh my God.
Okay.
I can't unsee this anymore.
I am going to be a lot more humble than my rabbinic colleague from Los Angeles, but I guess that's what happens when you're a rabbi in Los Angeles. I'd love to actually, we are so obsessed in this household with Israeli television, but I'm going to leave that for a moment and go back to the Democratic Party. You mentioned it earlier. I, for lots of different reasons, become an independent. It's not because I don't lean left on many issues, but I felt like as a rabbi, it was harder and harder to be part of a party that has said things in the ways that, Cortez and Tlaib and Omar and a Jew himself and Bernie Sanders, who has put forth a measure to not even send Iron Dome, which doesn't, maybe somehow it competes in his mind. I'm worried about the Jewish people that when I grew up, the one thing that kept us together was Israel, especially when Israel was in trouble. Like, people who ate, Chazer and Yom Kippur still showed up to protest when Israel was in trouble. Now we have Jew against Jew in ways that scare me. Can you comment a little bit on what you think has to be done in those circles? I'm sure you're aware because of our common friend and Amanda Berman's group, Zioness, and so there are those efforts. But I'm really worried, not just that Thomas Friedman's, by the way, article yesterday was, it's not just Israel that should be scared, it's the American synagogue that should be scared. And I am.
Yeah. It's very concerning. This, again, as a person who leans left, I'm a registered independent and always have been, just because I want to be, I'm open to listening, but obviously lean left on the majority of topics. It's very concerning. It's the good thing about it is that it's still a small part of the Democratic Party, but it's a very loud and hip crowd of the Democratic Party.
Woke.
I can't even with this word. I can't even with everything it means. I can't. It's just, it's a problem and people know it. This whole identity politics, ethnicity and race is rooted in Marxism and anti-Semitism. It's horrible. And I hope this needs to be, I hope it's going to get stopped. Look, Rashida Tlaib probably does not want Israel to exist. And if asked so, she's probably going to say it. I mean, she has a grandmother in was it Ramallah, or she has a grandmother in Palestine or in Israel, I'm not sure, but she probably would say, no, I don't want Israel to exist. I don't know where Ilhan Omar and AOC would stand on this, but what they're doing is real damage, and it needs to be stopped. And we're not doing well because they're so popular. They're so popular. So who we need to strengthen are people like Richie Torres.
Mm-hmm. I have a question for you, Noah, that, we're talking about the Democratic Party, and we're talking about, we'd like to call them kind of outliers, or, kind of the extreme left. And they're very loud and proud. And I think they're going to be moving maybe the United States towards them, not away from them, as time goes on. And one of the things that really caught my attention in the book is something that I think is important for American Jews to be able to articulate. So if you would encapsulate for a moment, you talked about the Palestinians, the Palestinian people, actually being 3 separate people that exist within that region. And if you could just unpack that, that was fascinating for me, because even though I knew it, I had never articulated it that way. Hey, there's not one people, and it's not saying there isn't a Palestinian people.
Of course.
Because it's as I would say of if you put Yoshi and Matt and I on a swing, I'd be teetering a little farther left than the two of them. Myself, admittedly, I'm proud of the fact that I support a Palestinian state, support the Palestinian people, and support Israel. We all do. But I think that nuance that you talked about would be really interesting for the crowd today to hear you speak about.
I'm so happy you pointed out to this, because I had a professor at Berkeley that has been a great guy, Udi Aran. I thank him profusely at the end, who we've been bouncing ideas back and forth throughout the process of writing. He's like Dr. Google. And when I started writing this chapter, it's called Arabs, and it talks about the Palestinians in Israel and in and out, and the coexistence on the ground, and so on and so forth. I actually told him, I was like, oh, so one chapter is going to be about coexistence, the other one's going to be about the West Bank, about Gaza, and about the Arab Israelis within Israel. And he's like, why are you doing that? And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, you're separating them. Like, why are you separating like that? I'm like, you guys in the academia, you don't understand how to, like, I was like giving him crap for it. I'm like, this is the thing. People don't, they look at it from the outside as the Palestinian people. And it's true, there's a Palestinian people. However, if you live in Gaza, if you live in the West Bank, and if you live inside of Israel, you have three different complete realities, which are driven by your geographical location, but they're also your political association and affiliation, your religious standing, your prospects for the future, the amount of rights and freedoms that you have. Like it's like a completely different, three different entities. Now, within Israel, the Palestinian, the Arab Israelis have full rights, not without problems, but full rights. In the West Bank, they're mostly under Palestinian Authority control. In Gaza, they're under Hamas control. So there is no one Palestinian people that Israel can kind of talk to in order to be like, all right, what do you want? Right? And that's one of the things that was important for me to clarify. And I think because I've been talking to so many people on both sides for so long, I was able to clear it out that way. And I'm glad you said that, because I think a lot of people were like, oh, never thought about it this way. So, and it's important. It's like three different political entities in a way.
Yes. And I just want to comment, and I'll, leave it to my brothers to ask you. I want to say how important it is to get the facts right. And your book gets the facts right, because many, many Americans, Jewish or not, don't know that Arabs have the right to vote, don't know the difference between Hamas and Fatah. Like there aren't no nuance, but it's something that's very important. So I'm just, again, so appreciative and grateful that you're with us, and the book is there for so many reasons.
Thank you. You can send the link. I can send the link out or somebody can send the link out.
It's already out. Yeah, we have it.
Oh, great.
And people are saying, by the way, that Amazon has it available again in hard copies. So people are on it.
I think it just became available today. Great.
No, I wanted to, first of all, thank you for your time. Unfortunately, I wish we had more time, because there's so much more to talk about. It's almost 5. One thing that I just wanted to acknowledge that I really appreciate about the book, and if you haven't ordered it yet, folks, Israel, A Simple Guide.
It's available. It's actually available.
Yeah.
Matthew, with your copy.
One of the things I really appreciate, and Sydney referenced it and you referenced it, is you're very open about ways that you, as an Israeli and as a lover of Israel, that you want Israel to grow and become the dream that we all want it to be, while at the same time acknowledging that as you have on this conversation, every country has its own challenges and its own flaws, and we're constantly trying to do better. And you point out, but if you single out Israel, if that's the country in the region that you are most focused on, and you said it earlier this evening, that, if you want to really worry about Palestinians in the region, you should think about Palestinians living in Lebanon, Palestinians living in Jordan, and what they're experiencing. And then you can think about other kinds of human rights violations in China and other parts of the world. So I really just want to appreciate that. And I think some of the questions we got are around educating children. I think it's so important to be able to have these conversations with our kids, day school students, religious school students, confirmation students, acknowledging that Israel, like every nation, is flawed, and yet There are so many things to celebrate, and there are so many things to lift up with pride and with joy. And it's our homeland. And so it's our job to be doing that, not to be afraid of being honest and open about the challenges, but also being supportive. So what I wanted to ask you to end with is something that gives you hope, something that gives you a sense of tikva, a sense of optimism for the future. Right now is a dark moment for so many reasons. What we're seeing in social media, what we're seeing, physical violence, what we're seeing actually happened in Israel, over the last month. But I know there's so many things that we can be optimistic about and hopeful about. Yeah. What are some of the things that keep you that give you that sense of tikva around Israel?
Oh my God, a lot of things make me hopeful. First of all, there are a lot of people that do know how incredible Israel is. That there's obviously no country is not flawed. Israel's not perfect, just like any other country in the world isn't. No country is flawed. And I always say this, and I say this with tongue in cheek, because that's the kind of person I am. I'm like, everybody is very on edge. Everybody's very scared and concerned. And I keep telling everybody it's okay. Take a deep breath. Everybody relax. We've been through Pharaoh. We've been through Hitler. We'll survive a few tweets by Bella Hadid. It's okay. So it's going to be okay.
Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Sydney. Thank you, Matthew. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We had over 100 participants this evening. We really are grateful to you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. We're going to post a video of this so that those friends and family members who couldn't be here tonight, you want to share these words with them, we'll make sure you can get a copy of that link. And I want to remind everybody, on June 24th, we're going to be welcoming back Dr. Larry Brilliant, a renowned epidemiologist, and he helped us at the beginning of the pandemic. We're going to talk to him a little bit as we're at this next stage and hopefully moving towards a much better stage for all of us. Noah, thank you so much. Toda rabah to you and to everybody for being with us. We're really grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Noah.
Thanks, Noah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.